conversations that help us grow in club quality, leadership, and personal growth, both inside and outside of Toastmasters. It's International Speech Contest season, and whether you're preparing for a humorous or inspirational speech, one thing is absolutely true. Stories matter. Tonight's session will help you understand why stories work, how to craft them intentionally, and what makes a story unforgettable to both audiences and judges. Before I introduce our featured speaker today, I would like to introduce Rhonda Bunty, our District 50 Club Growth Director. Rhonda, you have a few words?
I have a few words. I'm the Program Quality Director of District 50. And one of the things that I do as that particular position is contest season. And I just want to let you know that the Area 13 and 14 contests will be in Tyler, Texas this Saturday. If you like to take a drive out that way, I come out and support them. They are kicking off our contest season, and then we will be getting underway with a other contest the following weeks. Also, I shout out to COS Freedom Speakers in Maryland, or wherever you are located, because I know you're throughout the United States. Glad to see your large attendance tonight. Back to you, Madam Lucille Reddick.
All right, thank you. And I apologize for introducing you for your former role. You are Program Quality Director now. Sorry about that. All right, then, guys. Thank you for those announcements. It is time for me, and it is my absolute pleasure to introduce our featured guest this evening, Ann Barab. Ann's wisdom-based leadership messages are universal, timeless, and yes, gluten-free. She has traveled the world as a professional speaker for over 25 years. She's the former chief operating officer of a $1.5 billion bank. She's a recovering politician and a Toastmaster for 28 years. And is a distinguished Toastmaster and District 50's only accredited speaker. She has presented at district conferences on 3 continents and has spoken 5 times at the Toastmasters International Convention, an achievement very few can claim. This evening, Anne will share the secrets to crafting stories that make speeches memorable, including a specific storytelling formula, she said, that becomes easy to use once you understand it. Nothing beats great storytelling, and tonight you are going to learn how to become masterful. Please join me in welcoming Ann Barab. Woo!
Thank you. And thank you all for being here. Just by show of hands, how many of you are not part of District 50? No hands are available, okay? By show of hands, are any of you getting ready to compete in international? Anybody? Okay, so I guess you're just here to learn how to make stories good. Okie dokie, let's get going. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, can you see me now?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Okay. All right, mastering the art of storytelling. Let's talk about the 5 elements of a story. Wait a minute. I think what I need to do is back up for just a second and say, Lucille set me up as talking about the importance of stories in speeches. And that is absolutely true. You've heard it a million times already if you're an experienced Toastmaster, because no one will remember the point you're making, but they may never forget the story. So the story illustrates whatever point it is that you're trying to make. And trust me, they won't remember the point, but they'll remember the story, especially if it's well told. If it's not well told, they may get up and leave. Who can say? So there are 5 elements of a story. The first is characters. And if you want to write this down, I'm sure I'll be able to make this PowerPoint available to you all. But if you want to take notes, it's really pretty simple. So get your pen and paper out and start writing down little bullet points. Characters. The second thing is there's some kind of conflict that the characters are facing, and things are going downhill until there is some kind of spark that ignites a desire for transformation. And once you've established the transformation, the bow on the end of the story is a takeaway. So let's try to put this into a little bit different format. Did everybody get a chance that wants to write these down? I'll talk about takeaways for a second. Many times, what I see in Toastmasters is that people are simply telling a story. They have no takeaway. They are just, it's kind of like when you tell a story at dinner at night. This is what happened today. Well, that is kind of a story, but it's not the kind of story that goes well in a speech. In a speech, you've got to have a story arc and you've got to have some valuable takeaway. You are using up 7 minutes of somebody's life. Give them something to help make their life better. As a professional speaker, that was the only reason I was being hired, was to help people improve their lives. I'll help everybody in the audience try to improve their lives. So I got it pounded into me real early on. Takeaways matter. But for whatever reason, and I think it's partially because in Toastmasters, we get up and talk about all kinds of little bitty dinkin' things like how to give a dog a bath and how to make chocolate chip cookies. And yes, that's good for a 5 to 7 minute speech. And maybe you'll come away being able to make better chocolate chip cookies. But that is not the kind of takeaway that you need to have for an international, inspirational, motivational speech. It's got to be a little bit deeper. So now let's talk about the story arc. So this, I picked this background because to me it represents the story arc. You'll see in a second. So there is the before, which is like, this is how I was. This is how the story begins. So this is where everybody is. And then things happen. And then somebody, and the things that happen are making it go downhill. So somebody in the story, some character, makes a decision, and suddenly you begin to see transformation, and transformation means growth. And what did I learn from this experience? So let's put it visually so you can really feel it. Here's the story arc. As you can see, it's kind of like my background. And so here's where I was before. This was the beginning. This is the start of the story or the start of the event. You may start the story a little differently, but you've got to have before. And then things happened and they kind of went downhill and started getting hard. And I didn't like the way they were going and something wasn't working just properly. And it gets so bad that I come to a decision. There's a spark. And I go, wait a minute, this is enough of that. And then you begin upwardly into transformation. And finally, you learn something about life from the story. The characters in the story, somebody learns something about life. And then you interpret this for the audience. So I'm going to pause here for just a second and say, Does anybody have any questions about this? What we're next going to do is an example of a simple little story and how all these parts fit. But does anybody have any questions about story elements and the whole story arc? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands up, so we're just going to push on forward.
And there is a question
I'm sorry, there is a question. Yes.
in the chat. Let me
Oh, in the chat. Oh,
it
dear.
said, is this for fiction?
Oh, no, it's for any kind of story. This
Okay.
it could be your life, it could be real. I mean, this isn't PBS. I mean, your your stories can be embellished. If you present them as true, then they should be foundationally true. But you know, in Toastmasters, telling a story that is pure fiction is like a storytelling project. When you're talking about international speech competition, the story is best if it's one of your personal experiences or something you actually witnessed or saw, or somebody did something wonderful, you were there, and you want to make them the hero of the story. Telling a story about Abraham Lincoln is not the kind of story you need to tell because everybody knows you weren't there and all you're doing is reciting something from a history book. So the story, especially in an international speech, needs to be compellingly personal.
Okay.
So does that answer the question? Okay. All
All
right.
right. Can I,
So now,
I'll do
yes, go
one
ahead.
more, Jonathan Flannery, and then we'll go
It's
on
me,
and I'll,
Shane.
oh, Shane. Okay, Shane.
Um, Last year you had a speech during this speech competition. Um, can you did it follow this guideline? And if it did, can you outline how it did?
I could outline for it. Yes, it did follow this outline. And however, and it got the very end of it was this is what I learned. And it was the one about puzzles. And so that, it followed that outline, and we could talk offline about it. But the focus of, I'm going to try to walk you through an example that probably everybody knows the story, where as opposed to telling you about one of the speeches that I gave. Is that okay, Shane?
That's fair.
Okay,
I guess my point or what I'm getting at uh is this something that could be very, very loosely followed?
sure, of course.
Or I mean, could you win, or you could do it without? I don't know. I guess it's like if you just take the what did you learn from it and just do that, or something like that. You know what I'm saying? Like it's like I don't know if that
Well,
is
you
the question.
could say take the what I learned last, but in a international competition speech, what you're trying to do is tell how you got to that,
Okay.
which helps convince people, oh, that's like actual wisdom here. I'm being, this is a jewel. I need to protect it. This is a good lesson learned. Because if you don't tell the story of how you learned it, then you're just kind of pontificating on what you think is true.
Okay.
Okay?
All right.
All
Yes.
right.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Okay. So let's see if we can just. All right. So here's our story. Rudolph, the red-nosed reindeer, had a very shiny nose. And if you ever saw it, you'd even say it glows. All the other reindeers, though, used to laugh and call him names, and they never let poor Rudolph join in any of the reindeer games. Well, then one foggy Christmas Eve, Santa came to say, Hey, Rudolph, with your nose so bright, won't you guide my sleigh tonight? Well, then how the reindeer loved him as they shouted out with glee, Rudolph, the red-nosed reindeer, you'll go down in history. Everybody kind of familiar with that story?
Yes.
Okay, let's see how that fits with story elements. So, Who are the characters in this story? You can take yourself off mute so we can have a conversation.
Rudolph,
Rudolph, absolutely. Who else?
Santa,
Santa, yes.
The nose.
Yes, the nose is kind of a character. That's true. Good. Anybody else?
The other reindeer.
The other reindeer. Why, yes. What was the conflict?
They wouldn't let him play in the reindeer
That's true.
games.
They ostracized him. Okay. And what was the spark that kind of turned things around?
Foggy night.
Yeah, go deeper.
Because his nose, the main thing that caused him to be ostracized became a plus.
Yes.
In the
and
foggy
how did
night.
That happen?
It glowed.
And I asked him for help.
Exactly, Grant. Exactly. Santa, the boss, came out and asked him for help. Well, what happens when the boss takes advantage and utilizes something that's different that the other people haven't recognized it as being superb? What happens?
He transformed the negative into a positive.
Exactly, exactly. So, what could the takeaway of this story be? Now, we're going to talk about that again in just a second, but what I want to do is fill in the blanks for you. You got it right. The conflict was difference caused social injustice. That's a nice way of saying they were bullying him, or, making fun, just generally being not good friends. Santa noticed the difference was useful. Transformation is Rudolph's difference helped the team do well that night. Now, the takeaway could be a whole lot of different things. So let's look at this. Rudolph was different. The peers saw the difference as a liability. Santa saw the difference as an asset. Rudolph became a leader. So, what can we learn from a story like this? So, let me get you started on what you might have learned. One of you already mentioned that the nose could be useful. Somebody else had something. I'm losing it right. So, start throwing out the things that you were throwing out a second ago. What could a takeaway be about this story?
Embrace your differences.
Yes, yes. Erase your differences?
Embrace.
Oh, embrace. Yeah, erase wouldn't kind of go. Embrace your differences. Yes, excellent, Julie. What else?
A weakness can also be a strength. Weakness
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yes, it's how it's perceived. Yes. Anybody else? Okay.
That we all have a purpose.
Huh?
That we all can be used for a purpose.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So let me throw out some additional ideas. Perception makes all the difference. So that could be a takeaway. This little story illustrates that the reindeer perceived that the nose was bad, a liability. Santa saw it as something good. Okay, social injustice is hurtful. So they excluded him. So, it's not nice and we're not supposed to treat each other that way. Being useful is uplifting. We don't know if Rudolph was depressed when everybody scorned and shunned him, but being useful is uplifting because he's going to go down in history as being a great leader. In order to be a leader, others must be willing to follow. Nobody wanted to follow him until Santa said, "You be the leader." And then they're like, "Oh, yeah, let's get in the traces and start running." Creativity in solving problems with available tools. That would be Santa. He was looking around for a light and saw the nose and said, "Oh, that would work." So, corporate problems can be solved in ingenious ways. Happiness is being in community. Maybe Rudolph was happier when everybody embraced him as being part of the team. Pulling your own weight your own weight on a team is important. Societal norms can be harsh. Red noses are not acceptable in polite company, that kind of thing. Look at differences creatively. And several of you have made mentions that we're looking at that. So here's my point. Every one of these is a possible direction that you could take to make a case in a way that could be part of your message. Any one of these things could be the takeaway that you're working to try to get across. No bullying. Maybe that's your takeaway. So Rudolph's story, even though we don't know how Rudolph felt, but we do see the behavior without the emotion of it, the behavior of the other reindeer. So my point is almost anything, almost any story can illustrate almost any point. Got that?
Yes.
It's crazy, but it's true. So I had, as a professional speaker, I don't know, 10, 15 stories. And depending on whether I was teaching a learning seminar, a communication seminar, or a teamwork seminar, I could use the same stories and just make different points with them. So, what I'm trying to do is help you understand in creating a story. Here's the structure. And let's say you had a life experience and you want to tell about that. That's going to be your core story. So think about it, and this is where you really separate yourself from the pack, is if you can create a valuable takeaway, you start with the takeaway. In other words, you start with the conclusion. You start with the conclusion. You know what you're going to talk about. Maybe it's bullying. Maybe it's how to utilize assets. Maybe it's building community. Maybe, whatever it is, you understand where you want your speech to go. You're picking a lane and you know where you want it to go. Second, you got to start with the takeaway and then you craft your speech around it. So, for example, if you wanted to make this more a story about Rudolph feeling bad, Rudolph's trajectory from being rejected to being the leader, then you might throw in some little other things about this made Rudolph feel so bad that he couldn't play any games with them. Clearly he was an outsider and he was really depressed about that. But then when Santa came along and everybody said, "Oh, Rudolph, go," it really made him feel great. So you make up little parts to fill in or you focus. So if you were trying to talk about creativity and asset management, you would focus more on Santa and how he was like, "Oh, what the Haiti daddle, it's going to be so dark tonight." Of course, it's dark every night, but that's irrelevant here. Oh my goodness, what are we going to do? We need a flashlight. Oh my gosh, there's a nose that can lead us through the night. So becomes the hero of the story. So the story is less about Rudolph and more about Santa and understanding, recognizing creativity and utilizing it. Third, each story that you tell within a speech supports the takeaway. So let's say whatever your takeaway is, building community. If you're going to tell 2 or 3 stories, each one needs to in some way support your takeaway that building community is good and important. So then you want to order your stories in such a way that maybe you have a story about how an individual really isn't part of a community. And then maybe you tell a story in which the individual sees a community and tries to join in. And then maybe you have a third story where the community accepts it and he goes on to win the Nobel Prize. Okay. So the point is, if you're going to tell more than one story, they all need to support the takeaway, and they probably need to be told in a certain order because they're building up to the takeaway. They're talking about the story arc, and maybe the before was this, and then the negative events were this, and then the decision was this, and then the transformation was this. And they could be different stories, maybe having the same characters in them. So my point from all of this is all you need to understand, this is kind of like addition. You got one thing, and then you add on something else, and then you add on something else. And once you see the picture in your mind, it becomes so much easier to tell a story. Now, let's talk for a second. Oh, we'll take questions, but let's talk for just a second about international speech. You've only got 7 minutes. That's what you need to plan on, so you give yourself a 30-second cushion. You know, telling 3 stories in 7 minutes, you're not going to do justice to any of them. A good story is told with an absolute economy of words, which is why you need to write it down word for word. Notice I did not say memorize it word for word. I said write it down. The way I handle stories is I start typing what's in my head and I write it all down. And then I start yanking out sentences that don't lead the story forward, and phrases that are irrelevant, and adjectives and verbs that just don't sound like the way we talk, because the way we write and read is about 80% different than the way we talk. Then I look at, is every single thing mentioned essential to the plot, or is this a rabbit trail and this something that just I kind of go off on? Then I know I've taken out all the weeds from the story because you can see the weeds when you've written them down. And then you can start to polish the delivery of your story. I have coached people from around the world on international speech and storytelling. And I will tell you that the ones that are successful follow the advice of writing it down, and the ones who are unsuccessful flatly refuse to write down anything. And I was one of them for the first 10 years of professional speaking. I thought I was so clever and so erudite that it would just flow out of me. And then I had to do one of my promotional tapes, videotapes. And you have to do videotapes. That was the olden days. And you have to have a grabby first 90 seconds before a meeting planner will turn you off. So I took a story that I was telling and it took about 12 minutes to tell. And sometimes I could drag it out for 20 minutes. And it was very funny and very cute. And, you know, it's about my son coloring his hair all kinds of different colors and what a goofball that was. But then when we made the video, I realized that 90% of what I was saying was really not moving the story forward. By the time we had cut and pasted the key sentences, I had a 2-minute story. Now I can tell that story in 5 minutes, or in 7 minutes, or in 3 minutes, or in 10 minutes, because I know which elements I can give and take. And all of that's going on up here. But the reason I know that story so well and can do so much with it is because I wrote it all down. And then I studied every word and eliminated, kind of like Michelangelo did. He didn't create David, he just removed the excess stone around David. And so you just want to eliminate all the excess stuff. So now let's take questions.
Thank you so much, Barb. This is really helpful. Um, if someone in the audience has a question, if you would raise your hand and I will call on you. or if you cannot come off of mute, you can also put it in the chat and I will get it from there. But I have a question that I'm going to start out with, and then I'll come to you, Grant, since I see your hand first. Um, Now, with your formula, I'm putting it together all in my head. You mentioned this like math, 1 + 2 + 1 or whatever. Um, but what's the biggest mistake that speakers make before they even apply your formula?
Not knowing where they're going, not having a takeaway in mind. Or here's another way to do it. You look at the story you want to tell and you think, what did I actually learn from this life experience? Or what could somebody listening to me learn from this experience? That's when your story that you tell during dinner table conversation, uh, that's when you begin to expand the story and craft it more than just chit-chatting about your day. That's when you start to dig deep. So you start writing your story. And as you write it, you may discover that your takeaway becomes clearer and clearer. And that means you don't need this paragraph because that was a rabbit hole that doesn't build toward your takeaway. And we need more of this. So, for example, I gave a speech yesterday at my advanced club, and it was just showcase. It wasn't a contest, so I asked for feedback. And virtually everyone said, we really don't need the first 3 minutes of your speech. It didn't start getting interesting until you went into your story.
Oh,
And they were
wow.
exactly right. They were exactly right. So it was wonderful. So I've cut the first 3 minutes into about 3 sentences. And that means I'm into the meat of my takeaway, starting my story, making my points by about 45 seconds in. The other thing is in international, you really need to know exactly where you need to be in your speech. So if you invest 3 minutes in your intro and you've only got 4 minutes to go, you're wasting way too much time opening your speech.
Mm.
You got to have your intro being 30 to 45 seconds, and then you're into making your points, which lead into the story, which you come out of the story into, and this is what I learned, but you could learn also from this experience.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I'm thinking back to my speech giving days. I made it to district in 2022, but didn't win in district. And it was a humor speech contest, but I'm seeing exactly what I did wrong by what you're saying there. Thank you so much for that.
Well, let me tell you what I do wrong. I made
Oh,
it to district 3 or 4 times, and every time I go over by 3 seconds.
oh no.
I've done that twice in the last 10 years. And earlier on, I just didn't even, when I first started, people were urging me to compete, and I just didn't really get it. So I was just kind of standing up there, mooning the audience, I mean, just blabbing on and on about something. I told a story, and it had absolutely no point, no takeaway.
Oh my
And
goodness.
one of the judges, I later learned, said, that was really good, but I don't know what to do with it. It's certainly not a speech. It's more like a monologue.
Oh, okay. Okay, gotcha.
So I speak from experience, ladies and gentlemen. I can
I love that.
fail so good.
Spectacularly.
Spectacularly, yeah. Okay, next question.
All right, Grant, are you able to come off of mute and ask your question?
Do you ever use maybe a series of connected takeaways, or do you always just stick with one with your stories?
I'm sorry. Say your question again.
Do you ever have a series of connected takeaways? In other words, more than one, maybe two or
Sure,
three that are related, or do you just always stick
sure.
with one?
Absolutely. Yes. And that relates to your 3 points, you know? Make a point, tell a story, make a point, tell a story, make a point. Any international speech should not have more than 3 points. If you've got 5 points, you've got probably 4 too many. So you really need to have kind of 1 point that's supported by 2 supporting things. Because if you're trying to make 3 points, you've got about 90 seconds per point. 90, 90, 90, that gets you up to 4.5 minutes. And you ought to be into beginning to wrap it up by that time. So with an intro of, say, 1 minute, you're at 5.5 minutes if you've got 3 points and you haven't done any one of those points very well, not thoroughly enough to really land with your audience. And then you're going to wrap it up and pat yourself on the back for giving something that was so dense, nobody took anything away from it.
Okay.
Does that help?
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. I see Bilal, and then I'll take Bill.
Hey,
Thank
Bilal.
you. Hey, it's it's Bala. Thank you.
Bala. Okay.
Yeah, thank
Sorry.
you so much. No, it's okay. So, Anne, I have a question. So, does it have to be 3 points, or can that be three different time of a story? Do I have to tell the point every time, or just say, okay, I start this, I went here, I went there, I went there, and then finally convey the message?
Well, does the audience know where you're going, or do they just think you're wandering?
They know.
Are
How
you
do they
sure?
know?
Meaning that's a story, right? Okay. So when you say point, does it have to be a message?
Well, in international, it needs to be a message.
I know, but does it have to be 3 messages?
No,
Okay, that's what I wanted.
no, it
When you
does
say
not have to
point,
be 3.
okay,
It has to be one message,
and
one
then got it.
core takeaway that you may present a couple of different ways, but trying to do 2 or 3 different takeaways, it starts to muddy things. It needs to be very clear.
Correct. I agree. But when you say 3 points, I just want to make sure that I understand it correctly, that it's not 3 messages, but end of the day, 1 message, but then 3 cutover or 3 transition in a story.
Yes, let's go back to Rudolph. You're either going to focus on how Rudolph felt and what he learned, or you're going to focus on what Santa saw and what he learned, or you're going to focus on the reindeer and what they saw, or you're going to make a global observation about the community at the North Pole and how they came together. But you can't do all of those in a 5 to 7 minute speech. You got to pick your lane.
Got it. Got it. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So let me ask you a clarifying question on that. Because I may have gotten it mixed up too when you said no. Were you saying no more than 3 points in a speech? Is that what you were saying? Because you did mention no more than 3 points. So
Essentially, so I can give a 45-minute keynote that has 3 points. Now, I
gotcha.
talk for like 15 minutes on each point, and they all pull together. And 1 point has to be made before the next point is made. And those 2 have to be made because it's this plus this equals this, the third story or the third point. And the overall is, and that's what makes a great organization, or that's what cultivates empowerment, or whatever your takeaway point is. So each one of those supports. And I'm not saying it's a mandatory thing that you have to have 3 points or, the sky will fall. I'm just saying you cannot do 3 points in 5 minutes, 5 to 7 minutes, and do each one of them well. So that I, the listener, can understand and buy into what you're saying. Because essentially, international is a sales presentation. What you're selling is life wisdom.
Mm, okay. Okay, gotcha. All right. Did that answer it for you?
Does that help anybody?
Yes. Mhm. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So, and let me see. Oh, yes, Bill, come off mute. You can't find it? I see your lips moving, but I don't hear you.
William, do you see a little microphone down on the bottom left of your screen? It'll have a red slash through it. If you click that, it'll unmute you.
Yeah, your lips are moving.
Well, I tell you what, while Bill is arguing with his computer, how about I answer question number 3, and this came from
Oh.
Lucille. Oh, William, here you are. Bill, go.
Hey, we did it.
Okay, I have a simple question. If you are telling a chronological story that leads up to the one point or the one idea that you're trying to get across that makes the people see the point of the story, is I would consider that one story along a chronological point instead of group stories.
So what's your question?
My question is, if you have one story that's chronological with an appropriate point that the audience should take away, does that make a good story?
Okay, I'm gonna, yes, if it's chronological, it needs to be logical enough that people can follow the plot. However, the mistake that most people make is here's a story that is this long. Well, maybe it's this long. You know, shortly after the earth cooled is when it starts, and they've only gotten to maybe 500 BC before the 5 7 minutes is up. So figuring out where to start your story, yes, it's chronological, but is all this other stuff really necessary to be able to understand this? So what I learned Sunday was I was giving some chronological buildup to get to my point. And the feedback was, you need to kill that, which means I need to get into my point soon. I need to enter deeper into my chronological story.
The
Mm.
opening would be about 45 seconds. Then the chronological story would occur. And then at the end, there would be a point that they should take away.
Well, I tell you what, Bill, if you want to write your speech out and send it to me, I'll take a look
Okay.
and try to answer your question more specifically.
Okay. I'm not in the international contest. I'm the contest chair. So,
Thank you, Bill. Okay, I see Steve Malachek hand.
Yeah, thank you, Ann. Just a question. I heard one of the educational sessions, the speaker at one of the educational sessions at a Toastmaster conference emphasize the point that you always start with a story. In other words, you don't start with a message. So let's say you were going to give a speech on, you thought the audience was going to be interested in hearing something about perseverance or courage or social injustice. So you dig around in your story, library and come up with something that would support that message rather than the story driving the message. So I'm just curious about, let's say you're giving a commencement speech, and so they would want to probably hear something about going forward in life, that type of thing, and you would dig around to find some stories that would support that, as opposed, if you don't have any real experience with it, that's basically it. Do you start with a story, or do you sort of come up with the message and then find some stories from your background to support that?
Yes, I think I understand what you're asking. I actually wrote an article that was in the Toastmaster magazine about how to start speeches. And there's about 5 major ways that you can do it. One is to make a précis sentence statement, justice is good. You make a foundational statement so that the audience's brain can say, "Oh, I guess he's going to talk about justice." Okay, so people need to know where you're going. But another way to start is right smack dab in the middle of a story. I was driving along the road, and all of a sudden, I ran into an elephant. Okay, so that's kind of a story. You start there, and people lean in and go, what highway? I need to avoid that one. Somebody in California could say, was it the A5? And, you know, you got people going in all directions the minute but you can grab them if you start in the middle of a story. And then you go in, you make a point, and then you go in and you back up and you do some lead up. You can give a quote from a person. There's, go look Ann Barab up, and my article will show up in the archives. But the point is, every speech should not start the same way. So what you want to do is, but the audience will resent you if they cannot figure out where you're going. If you make the audience wander around with you for 3 to 5 minutes and they just don't know where you're going, and I have seen this happen so many times. And so, in closing, that's why you should never skate with bubble gum. That was the point. And it's kind of a classic mistake where a Toastmaster wants to tell a story, but they really don't have a point. So they end up with where the story ended. And then they say, thank you, Mr. Toastmaster, and sit down. And you're like, yeah, I think I'd rather know about chocolate chip cookies.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
That was a callback, by the way. Sorry, callbacks. You referenced something that happened earlier. Okay, yes, Jean.
Yes, Jean.
And thank you so much for doing this, you and Lucille. And I want to follow up on what you and Stephen were just talking about. I love your article on 5 great ways to begin a speech. My question is, what is your favorite way, or what do you think is most effective, or just from your experience in as far as beginning a speech? Do you have a favorite or?
Well, I have a story. And the story is when I first started speaking professionally, I saw Zig Ziglar across the room with the redhead. So I went over and sat down and introduced myself. And he, of course, was just his wonderful self. And I said, well, how do you start your speeches? And he said, well, I have 3 jokes that I generally use, and I try to make people laugh in the first 10 seconds because if they laugh, they'll like you. And I said, well, give me an example. He said, okay, this is one of my favorites. It's to start off and say, well, I heard a joke that was so funny, it would make your hair fall out. And then you pause and you look around the room and say, but I see many of you have already heard it. So big laugh, ha, 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 ha. He said, you can use that one. So I started using it, and I used it for a year. And then I was speaking to the Chinese American Institute of Engineers, and I walked into the room, and there was not a bald head in there. There was all this black hair just standing straight up. And I thought, I got to have a different opening. But what happened as a result of that was I realized that's a great joke for Zig. He's in the middle age, balding part of his life. So he's making fun of himself. But if I tell that joke, I'm a woman male bashing. So I quit telling that joke. Bottom line is, there is no universal opening that works for every speech and every speaker. So if you can find something that you feel comfortable with that gets that laugh within 10 seconds, go for it. Enjoy it and say, well, it's great to be here, but this is what we're going to talk about today. Again, get to your subject so they know where you're going. And if you tell the little back part of their brain where alligators bite and stuff like that, if they just feel that they know where you're going, they won't be angry and mad.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Jean. I have
So
another
that was how you
question.
tell a story. This is how it was before. Then there was an event. I met Zig. Then I started doing what he said, but I hit a crisis when there were no baldies. And then I transformed and realized that's not a right joke for me. And so what I learned was you can't use somebody else's stuff. You got to come up with your own. So
I
that's
love
an
that.
example of how you tell a story.
I love that. Well, talk to us a little bit about, because don't you have a book about humor, adding humor, or in your book you have something, a chapter or so about adding humor?
Yes, I wrote a book called Seven Secrets to Speaking So People Will Listen. And it's
Yes, I have that
seven
book.
steps, uh, really about crafting a speech and about how to put humor in it and how to use visual aids and just all kind of stuff like that.
Okay, so how important is adding humor? Zig told you about his starting his speeches with jokes and stuff. So give us a little what your take is on that. Is it important to have a humor in there, or we can take it or leave it?
Well, there is a joke in the professional speaking industry, and it is, do I have to have humor in my speeches? And the answer is only if you want to get paid.
Ah.
So the answer is yes. Humor is needed everywhere. And I was always bemused, not amused, but bemused by people who say, yeah, I got a joke in page 127 of my speech. I'm like, I'm sorry, I'd already be dead asleep by page 127 of your speech. I don't think you understand humor. So for example, when I would be talking to a potential client, I would try to always make them laugh just because I studied humor and I can, but make them laugh. When I first started speaking, I tried to advertise myself as a humorist and did that for 3 years. And then 9/11 happened and everybody went dead serious. We are not going to laugh here. This is way too serious for us to be able to laugh. So I quit advertising that I was humorous and just focused on my technical topics. And it was just a bonus when I showed up and could make people laugh.
Oh.
But I can give a serious teaching speech. And when I have people sit out in the audience and make a little hashtag, hash mark every single time they kind of laugh or chuckle or smile or, I don't know, have some sense of humor, uh, the count sometimes is 37 times in a 47-minute speech, and somebody else might get 300 times. So the rule of thumb for stand-up comedy is 6 laughs per minute. That's what you're trying to go for. But in speaking more in a corporate way, and that Toastmasters is focusing on speaking in a corporate way, um, it's about 3 laughs per minute.
Okay.
And you
Three
put it in by
laughs.
not telling jokes. It's not about telling jokes.
Okay.
Because,
All
the rabbi and the priest and the minister do not ever walk into a bar in some joke that you just don't tell jokes.
right.
You
It's just
tell events in a funny way.
in a funny way. Okay, got that. All right. So from a judge's perspective, what separates a story that's interesting from one that's truly memorable?
Well, it's if you feel moved and feel it was memorable.
Can you unpack that a little bit more?
Okay, well, I was being a mentor for a brand new club way back in, I don't know, maybe 2000, 1999. It was early on. It was 23 years ago. And it was at a technical firm. And this guy got up to give his icebreaker speech. And he said he grew up in Alaska and he was just it was he was like 7 or 8 in 1969 when there was the lunar landing, and he wanted to be an astronaut. And so he would go outside in his snowsuit and he would jump from hill of snow to hill of snow pretending that he was an astronaut. But then he became a programmer. That was 23, 24 years ago. And I remember
And you
that.
still
I
remember
can
it.
still see it in my mind. Another story like that, an icebreaker. Somebody said when they were 3 or 4, they had older brothers and sisters who went to school, and he so wanted to go to school, and he was so excited about it. And so his mom was going to drive him to school to show him to, how it worked. And he thought, okay, well, we're near the school, we're near the school. So he opened the door and jumped out, fell out of the car, and it was going like 20 miles an hour or
Oh my
something.
goodness.
And his mother, oh my gosh, and she got him up and got him back out in the car. And she said, okay, dear, the school bus will stop so that you can get off. That's the kind of stuff that sticks with people. I don't know the point he was making other than don't jump out of moving cars, but that wasn't the point at all. It was,
Mhm.
I think his point was something about he had to have experiences to be able to learn something. Who
Mm.
knows what the point was, but so that's examples of memorable little stories.
The stories. Okay. Okay. I like that. I'm thinking back to my speech. I had this humorous speech and it was a surprise trip that I had for my husband. We planned to go to New York and I had all these twists and turns and things that happened along the way with the story. Um, Listening to what you're saying, I think I had the story a little bit too convoluted. Because I had all this stuff about the blizzard happening and uh all of all of these crazy things that it's a true story, but all of these crazy things that happened to lead up to this one night in New York and the blizzard that canceled our whole thing we had planned and all of that. So yes, wanted to get to that, but that I think is helpful what you're saying. I may recraft that and do it
Right.
again. Let me see. We
I'd
have
like to
one.
address, if
Oh,
you
go
don't
ahead.
mind, Lucille. Lucille gave me some questions, and I think one of them is really, really interesting that I need to address. How
Okay.
can speakers choose stories that are personal yet universally relatable to judges and audiences? Everything that happens in your life happens to other people. The point is, nobody really wants to know details of your cancer story. They just want to know what you took away from the experience. They don't want to know how many stitches there were. They don't want to know how horrible the chemo was. They don't want to know how big the tumor was. You had cancer. Oh, so how did you deal with it?
Mm.
So if you're telling a story with all the details about some horrible thing, upsetting thing that happened to you, then you're using the audience for therapy. So every life experience applies. All you need to do is try to make your takeaway a universal human emotion. It doesn't have to be a universal experience because not every person on the universe knows how to drive a car. So it's not about, your takeaway isn't about how to stop at stoplights. It's about how to keep going in life
Mm.
or something like that. You take a small thing and then your takeaway is a larger truth. It's wisdom. It's applied knowledge. Wisdom is applied knowledge. So your story is about the acquisition of the knowledge, and your takeaway is the wisdom that helped you craft a better life.
Oh, I love that. The wisdom that helped us craft a better life.
Right.
Mm, mm, mm.
Not information, knowledge is not wisdom. It's applying it. So,
It's
like,
applying it.
love thy neighbor as thyself. Ah,
Mm,
easy to say, hard to do.
to do.
So, it's not wisdom if you're just parroting a little, truism. You
Hmm.
got to walk your talk, you got to live it, and then you become wise.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Well, Anne, in the interest of time, we are at the end of our session, and you have given me so much. Look, I got all these notes here, front
Well,
and
I
back.
hope everybody, okay, my wish for tonight is that every one of you came away with some new little inch smarter on how to be a better communicator. It's not about trying to grab on everything at one time. So what I would like to suggest to you is when you get off of this phone call, when you get off the Zoom call, before you get up from your desk and walk away, write down one thing you learned. If you want to write down 2 or 3 things, write them down. You don't need a paragraph, just a couple of words to prompt your memory so that tomorrow morning, when you wake up and you have forgotten everything you heard, because by tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, you will only remember about 17% of what we talked about here tonight. So make yourself some notes so you can remember you learned it.
Okay. I love that. That's a wonderful closing statement for us to take away. So, what I will say is thank you again, Anne, for sharing your expertise, your experience, and your generosity with us tonight. This session will absolutely help our members elevate their speeches. I know it's going to help me. And thank you to everyone who joined this evening. Remember, Toastmasters Thrive happens every third Monday of the month at 7 p.m. Central Time. We hope you'll join us again and invite another Toastmaster to attend with you. So until next time, keep learning, keep leading, and keep thriving. Have a wonderful evening, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Lucille,
Yes,
how will I
ma'am.
be able to get a copy of the recording?
Let me hit stop on the recording. Stop.